The crimson sands of Kepler 442 be stretched endlessly under twin suns, broken only by jagged obsidian formations that jutted from the ground like broken teeth. In the shadow of one such formation, Staff Sergeant Marcus Ghost Rodriguez pressed himself against the volcanic glass. His breathing controlled despite 3 days without sleep. His squad was gone. All of them. The hegemony's elite apex hunters had found their forward operating base 72 hours ago. 12 of the galaxy's most feared killers had descended upon Fox Company like vengeful gods. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the hegemony's answer to humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender. Each one a perfect fusion of 3 different apex predator species. Rodriguez had watched through his scope as his brothers-in-arms were systematically eliminated. Lieutenant Jackson, torn apart by razor-sharp Veltar claws. Corporal Williams, dissolved by Zephyrian acid spit. Private Martinez, crushed by the hydraulic strength of a Thakmori warrior form. Each death had been prolonged, theatrical entertainment for creatures that viewed humans as amusing prey. But they'd made one critical error in their perfection. They'd left one human alive. Rodriguez checked his remaining ammunition. 2 magazines for his plasma rifle, 1 for his sidearm, and 3 fragmentation grenades. Against 12 apex predators designed specifically to hunt his species, it should have been suicide. His tactical computer calculated his survival odds at 0.003%. Essentially 0. Should have been 0. But Rodriguez had grown up in the Louisiana bayous, where gators and wild boar taught him that the most dangerous animal was the one that refused to die quietly. The Marines had refined those instincts into something deadlier, the absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter the odds. His calm crackled with their hunting calls, a mixture of chittering, growls, and harmonic tones that spoke of confidence. They were enjoying this. To them, he was already dead. They were just prolonging the entertainment. Their arrogance was palpable, transmitted through every mocking sound. Unknown human designation. The lead hunter's voice came through the universal translator, distorted by mandibles and vocal cords never meant for human speech. Your resistance is admirable but futile. Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Checking the jury-rigged explosive device, he'd been working on salvaged components from his fallen comrades' equipment, wired together with field-expedient ingenuity. 3 days of being hunted had taught him something crucial about his pursuers. They were perfect killing machines, yes, but they were also arrogant. They hunted like apex predators because that's exactly what they were, and apex predators had never learned to fear their prey. They'd never encountered prey that bit back. This is Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, United Earth Marine Corps, serial number 2847-9956, Delta. He spoke into his comm, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice was steady, professional, the calm of a man who'd already made peace with death. To whoever's listening, tell my family I did my duty. Tell them Fox Company went down fighting. He paused, watching heat signatures moving between the obsidian spires through his thermal scope. 12 perfect killers, closing in for what they thought would be an easy finish. And tell command. Rodriguez's voice hardened to cold steel. Tell them the hunters just became the hunted. He activated the explosive device and threw it toward the largest heat signature. The blast echoed across the wasteland, sending volcanic glass fragments scattering like deadly rain. It would barely scratch their bio-enhanced armor, but it wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to announce that the prey had decided to bite back. The real hunt was just beginning. The explosion echoed across the crimson wasteland, sending fragments of volcanic glass in every direction. The apex hunters barely flinched. Their bio-enhanced carapaces could withstand direct artillery strikes. But something else made them pause, something that triggered primal unease in their perfectly engineered minds. The human was laughing. Amusing, hissed Zekthera, the pack leader, her serpentine Veltar heritage evident in the way she tasted the air with a forked tongue. 6 feet of scaled death wrapped in bio-armor. She had personally eliminated 47 human soldiers across 3 campaigns. The prey exhibits aberrant behavioral patterns. Perhaps terror has induced psychosis. More likely desperation, rumbled Thakmar, his massive Thakmori bulk making the ground tremble with each step. Standing nearly 8 feet tall and weighing close to half a ton, his hydraulic muscle systems could crush steel with casual ease. Humans are known to become irrational when cornered, like wounded animals. But Sylvesh, whose Zephyrian neural implants gave him tactical prescience that bordered on precognition, felt something the others missed. His compound eyes processed probability cascades at superhuman speed, and every calculation told him something was wrong. No! He buzzed through his breathing spiracles. This is different. Observe his biometric readings. Steady pulse, controlled breathing, elevated adrenaline but focused, not panicked. This is not the signature of a broken mind. They spread out in perfect formation, a technique that had eliminated 17 human military units across 4 systems without a single casualty. Each hunter was worth a platoon of regular soldiers. Their bioengineered bodies combined the best evolutionary traits of their species. Veltar speed and neurotoxin, Thakmori strength and nearly impenetrable armor, Zephyrian tactical intellect that could process 100 variables simultaneously. Against any normal enemy, they were invincible. But as they advanced on Rodriguez's last known position, they found only empty space and a crudely carved message in the obsidian wall. Semper Fi death from above. The first trap triggered as Kresak, the youngest of the pack, stepped on what appeared to be solid ground. The volcanic sand had been carefully prepared, hollowed out, and filled with salvaged plasma charges from Fox Company's fallen warriors. The explosion turned ordinary sand into superheated glass needles that screamed through the air at hypersonic velocity. Even bioenhanced carapace had limits. Kresak's agonized scream was cut short as a second, precisely timed explosion brought down a carefully weakened obsidian spire directly onto his position. The young hunter disappeared beneath 2 tons of volcanic rock, his perfect genetics rendered irrelevant by simple physics and human ingenuity. 11 hunters became 10. Impossible, Zekthara snarled, examining the trap's sophisticated construction with growing unease. Multi-stage explosives, precise timing, knowledge of their movement patterns. This required tactical sophistication that contradicted everything in their files. Humans lack the cognitive capacity for such complex battlefield engineering. Her words were cut off by the sharp crack of a plasma rifle. The shot, fired from an impossible angle high above them, caught Melthis in the microscopic gap where her neck armor met her helmet. A precision shot that required not just marksmanship, but intimate knowledge of their armor's design flaws. The Veltar hybrid dropped without a sound, her neurotoxin glands spilling uselessly onto the crimson sand. He's using our own hunting patterns against us, Sylvesh realized, his tactical implants working frantically to process this new data. He studied us while we eliminated his pack. He knows how we move, how we think, how we kill. This human has learned to predict our behavior. 10 hunters became 9. High above them, nestled in a crevice that should have been impossible for human physiology to reach, Rodriguez smiled coldly as he chambered another round. The climb had nearly killed him, but desperation and marine training had driven him beyond normal human limitations. The hegemony had made these creatures to be perfect hunters of humans. But they'd made one fundamental, fatal error in their design philosophy. They'd built them to hunt normal humans. By the 4th day, the apex hunters had learned to fear the silence. Rodriguez had vanished into the labyrinthine obsidian formations like smoke, leaving behind a trail of carefully placed traps and psychological warfare that turned their greatest strengths against them. Every shadow could hide death. Every sound could be misdirection. They'd lost 3 more hunters in the past 18 hours. Velnok had triggered a deadfall that shouldn't have been possible to engineer with primitive human tools, until they found the improvised pulley system Rodriguez had constructed using their own equipment, salvaged from his fallen comrades. The Thakmori warriors' enhanced reflexes hadn't been enough to avoid 2 tons of volcanic rock. Zileth had fallen to a trap so elegantly simple it was almost insulting, tripwire connected to a salvaged fusion grenade. Her Zephyrian prescience had detected the danger a split second too late. Krothyul simply vanished during his watch. They found pieces of him spread across 50 meters, the victim of a trap that used his own bio-enhanced strength against him. A tension system that had literally torn him apart when triggered. He's not fighting like a human, Thakmar rumbled, his massive frame betraying the first signs of uncertainty. Humans are direct. They meet strength with strength. This is something else. He's fighting like us, Silvesh corrected, his tactical implants working overtime to predict their prey's next move. But better. He understands pack dynamics, territorial behavior, predator psychology. How is this possible? Zekthara tested the air with her forked tongue, tasting fear scent from her own hunters for the first time in their existence. Perhaps we underestimated human adaptability. What they couldn't understand, was that Rodriguez wasn't just adapting. He was implementing everything the Corps had taught him about asymmetric warfare, combined with hard-earned lessons from a childhood spent in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. The hegemony had created perfect hunters, but they'd designed them to hunt in optimal conditions against predictable prey. They'd never encountered something that treated the hunt itself as just another battlefield to be dominated. From his position in a carefully camouflaged hide, Rodriguez watched the remaining 6 hunters through salvaged optics. They were clustering now, abandoning their superior hunting formation in favor of defensive positioning. Fear was making them predictable. Good. He activated his comm system, broadcasting on their frequency. You know what your problem is? His voice carried across the crimson wasteland, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. You hunt like apex predators. All instinct, no imagination. Zekthara hissed her response. You cannot hide forever, human. We will find you. I'm not hiding, Rodriguez replied, and they could hear the smile in his voice. I'm hunting, and right now, I've got you surrounded. Impossible, Thakmar growled. You are one being. We are 6. Yeah. Rodriguez's laughter was cold as vacuum. Then why are you all looking over your shoulders? The psychological pressure was working. These creatures had never been prey before. They didn't know how to handle the constant stress, the way every shadow could hide death, the knowledge that their hunter had become their stalker. But Rodriguez knew. He'd learned it in the bayou, perfected it in a dozen campaigns across human space. Fear was just another weapon, and he wielded it with surgical precision. The hunters were about to learn why humans had clawed their way to the top of their planet's food chain. It wasn't because they were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. It was because they were the most stubborn, most adaptable, most relentlessly creative killers evolution had ever produced. And Rodriguez was about to give them a masterclass in human lethality. The ambush came at dawn, when the twin suns cast long shadows across the volcanic wasteland and thermal differentials made heat signatures dance like ghosts across targeting systems. Rodriguez had spent the night moving through the obsidian maze with skills learned in Louisiana swamps, navigating terrain that should have been impossible for human feet. Bare rock that would shred normal boots, crevices barely wide enough for his shoulders, vertical climbs that required fingertip holds on razor-sharp volcanic glass. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, designed to position him in the one place the hunters would never expect. Directly in their path of retreat, because he'd finally decoded their behavioral patterns completely. The apex hunters were perfect predators, but they were still governed by instinctive behaviors programmed into their genetic code. And all pack predators, when threatened and reduced in numbers, fell back on the same evolutionary response. Retreat to defensible positions and regroup. There was only one such position in this entire region. A natural fortress of obsidian spires that offered multiple escape routes, clear sightlines, and elevated defensive positions. Every tactical manual in the galaxy would recommend it. It was strategically perfect, tactically sound, and completely predictable, which made it Rodriguez's killing ground. The trap was his masterpiece, 3 days of careful preparation, intimate knowledge of their psychology, and salvaged ordnance from Fox Company's fallen warriors distilled into one moment of absolute violence. As the 6 remaining hunters moved through the narrow passage between the spires, they triggered the most sophisticated ambush Rodriguez had ever conceived. Shaped charges, positioned using detailed knowledge of their movement patterns and bio-enhanced reflexes. Not enough explosive force to kill them outright, their armor could withstand direct artillery hits. But Rodriguez wasn't trying to kill them with the blast itself. He was engineering a controlled avalanche. The thunderous roar echoed across the wasteland as tons of carefully weakened volcanic glass came crashing down in a precisely orchestrated collapse. But this wasn't a simple cave-in designed to crush them. Rodriguez had studied their capabilities for days, learned their escape patterns, their reflexes, their instinctive responses to danger. The collapse was designed to separate them. Massive obsidian blocks fell in sequence, each one calculated to force the hunters to dodge in specific directions, channeling them like water through a maze. Within seconds, the pack was scattered across the ruins, each hunter isolated from their support network, their perfect formation shattered by simple physics and human engineering. Sylvesh found himself cut off from the pack, his tactical implants screaming warnings as he realized the trap's true sophistication. The human hadn't just triggered a rockfall, he'd engineered it to exploit their individual strengths against them, using their own enhanced reflexes to maneuver them exactly where he wanted them. That's when Rodriguez dropped from above like an avenging angel. The Zephyrian hunter's prescience gave him a split-second warning, probability cascades flooding his enhanced consciousness with danger signals. But Rodriguez had studied their files during his reconnaissance, analyzed their capabilities with the methodical precision of a marine intelligence specialist. He'd planned for the precognitive abilities, approaching from an angle that gave Sylvesh's implants conflicting probability cascades, multiple equally likely attack vectors that overloaded his tactical processing. The combat knife, carved from obsidian and sharpened to molecular thinness over hours of patient work, slid between bio-enhanced carapace plates with surgical precision. Rodriguez had memorized every weakness in their armor design, every microscopic gap that flexibility required. Sylvesh dropped without a sound, his tactical genius silenced forever by human determination and intimate knowledge of alien anatomy. 5 left. Rodriguez's voice echoed through the comm system, broadcast to the remaining hunters with the calm professionalism of a Marine completing a mission. "Come and get me." But his tone carried something else now, not desperation or fear, but the cold confidence of a predator who had finally revealed his true nature. The siege lasted 6 hours, each minute a carefully orchestrated symphony of psychological destruction. Rodriguez used every second to systematically dismantle their morale, their confidence, and their tactical cohesion. Sniper fire from impossible angles that shouldn't have been achievable with human physiology, shots that required him to brace against volcanic glass edges that would have shredded normal flesh, firing positions that demanded flexibility beyond human norms. Each shot was precisely calculated to miss by mere centimeters, close enough to hear the plasma bolt's sonic crack, close enough to feel superheated air against bio-enhanced skin. The message was clear. I could have killed you, but I chose not to. Yet, improvised explosives detonated at calculated intervals, never quite close enough to cause lethal damage but positioned perfectly to rattle nerves that had never known fear. Rodriguez had studied their stress responses during his observations, learned how their enhanced nervous systems process threat assessment. Each explosion was timed to trigger maximum psychological impact while conserving his dwindling explosive materials. But most devastatingly, he weaponized their own perfection against them. The apex hunters had been engineered to be flawless killing machines, their neural pathways optimized for success, their psychological profiles designed around constant victory. They possessed no adaptation protocols for systematic failure, no coping mechanisms for prolonged stress, no experience with being systematically outmaneuvered by supposedly inferior beings. Every setback was a system error they couldn't process, every casualty a malfunction in their perfect design that sent cascading failures through their enhanced psychologies. Rodriguez, on the other hand, had learned to weaponize failure from his first day in Marine Corps boot camp. Every mistake was tactical data, every defeat was educational material, every scar was a lesson in survival hard-coded into his neural pathways. The Corps had beaten failure into him until he learned to make it work for him instead of against him. When Thakmar finally breached the obsidian barrier, his massive hydraulic systems screaming with effort as volcanic glass cracked and shattered, Only 3 hunters emerged into the crimson daylight. Xerox had succumbed to complete psychological breakdown during the siege, his hybrid neural pathways overloading under stress they'd never been designed to handle. The perfect fusion of 3 apex predator species had simply shut down, his enhanced mind unable to process the fundamental concept of being prey rather than predator. He died without physical injury, his brain essentially blue-screening under paradoxical input. The remaining hunters, Zekthera, Thakmar, and Vilhash, were no longer the confident apex predators who'd eliminated Fox Company with casual efficiency. They moved like beaten animals, constantly checking their flanks, jumping at shadows cast by volcanic formations, their perfect formation ragged with exhaustion and neurological stress. Their bio-enhanced senses, designed to track prey, now betrayed them by detecting threats everywhere. "Where is he?" Vilhash chittered, her Veltar sensory organs on maximum alertness, processing chemical signatures with paranoid intensity. "I can smell his scent everywhere, but the signatures are confused, overlapping, contradictory. He's been using our dead packmate's pheromone glands," Zekthera realized with growing horror, her forked tongue tasting the air and finding deliberate chemical confusion, creating false scent trails, masking his real position with our own biology. How did he acquire such intimate knowledge of our physiological systems? The answer was simple: dissection. Rodriguez had spent precious hours during the siege studying the corpses of fallen hunters, learning their anatomy with the same methodical precision he'd once applied to field-stripping weapons. Knowledge was ammunition, and he'd been gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities through direct examination. The sniper shot took Vilhash in the head before she could process the implications, the plasma bolt punching through cranial armor like tissue paper. She dropped instantly, her perfect reflexes and enhanced awareness useless against an attack she never detected. 2 hunters remained. But they were no longer hunting. They were being systematically harvested. The final battlefield was a circular depression in the volcanic glass, like an ancient arena carved by geological forces and refined by human ingenuity. Rodriguez stood in the center, plasma rifle raised, looking for all the world like a desperate human making his final stand against impossible odds. But appearances, as the hunters were about to learn, could be devastatingly deceptive. Zekthera and Thakmar approached from opposite sides, their tactical formation still perfect despite 5 days of psychological warfare and systematic elimination of their pack. Even broken and demoralized, they remained apex predators with millions of years of evolutionary refinement backing their every move, bio-enhanced killing machines that had eliminated entire military units without sustaining a single casualty. "Surrender now, and your death will be swift," Zekthera offered, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Her serpentine form coiled with nervous energy, enhanced muscles beneath bio-armor twitching with barely contained violence. After days of being hunted by an invisible ghost, the prospect of direct combat almost seemed like relief. Rodriguez smiled grimly, his marine issue combat gear battered and bloodstained, his face carved with exhaustion and determination. But his eyes held something that made both hunters pause, not fear or desperation, but the cold calculation of a predator who had been playing a longer game than anyone realized. "Counteroffer," he said, his voice carrying across the arena with unwavering confidence. "You surrender, and I'll make sure your deaths are memorable enough to send a message back to your hegemony masters." The 2 hunters exchanged glances through their enhanced visual systems. This human had eliminated 10 of their kind through cunning and preparation, systematically dismantling the most elite kill squad ever assembled. But now he was trapped in open ground with nowhere to run, no obsidian formations to hide behind, no elaborate traps to spring. Finally, they had the advantage their genetics and engineering promised. They charged with synchronized precision. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies across human space for decades to come, dissected frame by frame in tactical studies and psychological warfare courses. Rodriguez had spent 5 days learning their movement patterns, their attack vectors, their instinctive responses to various combat stimuli. He knew exactly how they would approach this final confrontation. Zekthera's serpentine speed in a direct frontal assault, using her Veltar neurotoxin and razor claws, while Thokmar's massive bulk came from the flank, employing his hydraulic strength to cut off escape routes and crush anything that survived his partner's initial attack. He'd planned for every possibility. As the hunters closed distance with frightening speed, Rodriguez triggered his masterpiece. Not explosives this time. He'd exhausted those resources, herding them into position. This was something far more subtle and infinitely more deadly, a trap that used the fundamental laws of physics against genetically perfect killing machines. The volcanic glass beneath their feet had been carefully prepared through thermal manipulation, heated and cooled repeatedly over the past day using salvaged power cells and reflective surfaces, creating thermal stress fractures in the molecular structure. It looked solid, appeared stable under normal inspection, but it was actually a crystalline web of microscopic fractures waiting for precisely the right pressure to collapse catastrophically. The pressure of two charging apex predators moving at maximum velocity. Thokmar's massive weight hit the sabotaged surface first. The false floor held for exactly one step, long enough for him to commit fully to his attack vector, not long enough for his enhanced reflexes to compensate. He plunged through the carefully engineered weak point into a pit Rodriguez had spent precious hours carving with improvised tools, lined with obsidian spikes and the last of his shaped charges, positioned with surgical precision. The Thakmori warrior's bio-enhanced armor might have deflected the spikes. His redundant organ systems might have survived conventional explosives. But Rodriguez had learned something crucial about their hybrid physiology during his anatomical studies of fallen hunters. Their incredible strength was hydraulic, powered by pressurized biofluid systems that enhanced their muscular capabilities. The shaped charges weren't positioned to kill Thokmar outright. They were carefully placed to rupture those internal pressure systems, turning his own enhanced biology into a weapon of self-destruction. The hunter's death scream echoed across the wasteland as his own genetically perfected strength literally tore him apart from the inside. The rescue ship found Rodriguez 3 hours later, sitting calmly beside the emergency beacon with the methodical patience of a Marine completing paperwork. He was using his combat knife to carve names into a piece of obsidian with surgical precision, creating a memorial that would endure longer than any standard marker. 12 names. His fallen comrades from Fox Company, each letter carved deep enough to last centuries. Captain Elena Vasquez of the UES Retribution had seen plenty of combat zones in her 15-year career, from the Centauri Rebellion to the Proxima Siege, but the scene on Kepler 442b left even her battle-hardened crew speechless. An entire Apex Hunter kill squad, the hegemony's most feared weapon, creatures that had eliminated 17 human military units without sustaining a single casualty, reduced to scattered remains across 2 square kilometers of volcanic wasteland. All by one Marine who looked like he'd been through a meat grinder but was still breathing. Jesus Christ, Rodriguez, she breathed as the medical team ran their scanners over him, finding malnutrition, dehydration, multiple lacerations, and stress fractures in both hands from climbing volcanic glass. "How the hell did you manage to?" "Training, ma'am," Rodriguez replied simply, never looking up from his carving. Each letter formed with the same precision he'd used to plan his traps. "The Corps taught me to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So I did." The after-action report would eventually fill 300 pages and require testimony from xenobiology experts, tactical analysts, psychological warfare specialists, and materials engineers. Military strategists would spend months analyzing every aspect of the engagement, from Rodriguez's improvised weapons to his use of environmental factors. But the core facts were elegantly simple. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez had taken everything the hegemony could throw at him and systematically dismantled it using standard-issue equipment, fieldcraft learned in Earth's swamps, and pure human stubbornness. Within a week, the story spread through human space like wildfire, transmitted faster than official reports through the informal networks that connected every human military unit. The hegemony's supposedly unstoppable killers had been eliminated by a single Marine using nothing but tactical ingenuity and absolute refusal to surrender. Recruitment stations across dozens of worlds saw unprecedented surges of new volunteers, all wanting to be part of the Corps that produced soldiers like Rodriguez. But the real impact was felt in hegemony space, where the psychological warfare value proved worth more than any territorial victory. The Apex Hunter program was quietly discontinued after Kepler 442b, its funding redirected to more conventional weapons development. The psychological implications were devastating. If their perfect biological weapons could be defeated by human creativity, what else were their supposedly inferior enemies capable of? More importantly, the hegemony's diverse alien member species began whispering among themselves in council chambers and fleet briefings. How do you fight an enemy that turns your greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses? How do you defeat creatures that treat impossible odds as merely another tactical challenge to overcome? The answer, as species after species would learn over the following years, was devastatingly simple. You don't fight them. You negotiate. Rodriguez himself was offered an immediate promotion to Master Sergeant, the Distinguished Service Cross, and his choice of any assignment in human space training academies, staff positions, even a comfortable desk job at command. He accepted the medal on behalf of Fox Company, then politely turned down the promotion and comfortable assignments. "With respect, sir," he told the assembled brass in the formal ceremony aboard the Retribution, his dress uniform bearing the ribbon of his new decoration. "My job isn't finished. There are still Marines out there who might need backup, and the Corps doesn't leave anyone behind. Because that's what Marines did, what they'd always done since the founding of the Corps centuries ago. They watched each other's backs through every hell the galaxy could devise. They never abandoned their brothers and sisters, and they turned impossible odds into just another successful mission through sheer bloody-minded determination and tactical excellence. The hegemony had tried to create the perfect hunters, fusing the best traits of apex predator species into biological killing machines. But they'd forgotten that humans had already perfected something far more dangerous than any predator. The absolute, uncompromising refusal to accept defeat, combined with the intelligence to turn any situation to their advantage. Rodriguez returned to active duty 2 weeks later, leading a new squad of Marines who'd volunteered specifically to serve under the man who'd single-handedly rewritten the rules of asymmetric warfare. His reputation preceded him now throughout both human and alien space, Ghost Rodriguez, the Marine who'd turned the hunters into the hunted, the soldier who'd proven that human ingenuity could overcome any challenge. But he never talked about Kepler 442b, never boasted about his impossible victory against genetically perfect killers. When pressed by curious war correspondents or eager young recruits seeking tactical wisdom, he'd simply say, "I did my job, just like any Marine would do." Which was, the Corps leadership noted with considerable satisfaction, exactly the kind of humble professionalism they'd come to expect from their finest warriors. The war continued across dozens of star systems, but the balance had fundamentally shifted. The hegemony's member species now understood that humanity possessed something their perfect weapons couldn't counter: the capacity to learn, adapt, and overcome any challenge through pure determination and creative problem-solving. It was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations, whispered in alien military academies and strategic planning sessions. Never underestimate humans. Never hunt them for sport, because eventually, inevitably, they'll learn to hunt you back. And when they do, they won't just win, they'll make sure everyone in the galaxy knows exactly how outclassed you really were. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful.